Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where the movie business is doing good. Oh boy! It's no Barbenheimer, but this is traditional counter-programming at its finest. This is the way Hollywood used to release movies. And then they got into this thing where they'd give one movie a weekend all to itself. You don't need to do that. Counter-program, baby. And sure enough, Dune Part Two and Kung Fu Panda 4, Bob Iger is right about the sequels, they coexist in perfect harmony, and they're both raking in the cash. Both films, in their second and third weekends respectively, have incredible holds. Oh my goodness. Particularly Dune Part 2, as it continues to be a real-life box office Lisan al-Gaib. For Dune Part 2 to be holding this well, this is incredible. That not only means that repeat viewing is very healthy, but that the curiosity factor is kicked in, where people who thought they weren't going to see Dune Part 2 in theaters, they couldn't hold out anymore. There's too much hype, too much conversation. They decided to go check it out. Movies that have really long legs, like two really good examples are the first Avatar and the second one, but the first Avatar and also Gravity, two films that really utilize 3D very well and technical aspects. And people in that regard also were like, maybe we should go check it out. I also feel that Barbenheimer also benefited from that as well. That's really a sweet spot you want to get into. If you want to have a long run for your movie, you not only want that repeat viewing, but you want to lure the people on the fence, and maybe even beyond that, to check it out in theaters. And Dune Part 2 seems to be doing that. Oh my goodness. Kung Fu Panda 4 is now the second film to pass the century mark this year, the first being Dune Part 2, and that's now past the double century mark, past 200 million domestic. And in the worldwide box office of the first Dune, it's passed that up, and it's tracking significantly ahead of Warner Brothers and Chalamet's Wonka, itself a huge hit. Oh boy, this is amazing stuff. I love it. Kudos also to Bob Marley. The movie might not actually hit the century mark, but it's just so close, and that's very impressive. Dune Part 2 is keeping most of its IMAX screens, not just this weekend, with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire having to settle for Dolby, but if you look at some of the showtimes for the weekend after with Warner Brothers' other big movie of the month, Godzilla x Kong, it looks like Godzilla x Kong will take over the Dolby, while in many places, at least the 70 millimeter prints, Dune Part 2 is going to still keep those IMAX screens. Great for Warner Brothers, but that really kind of sucks for Sony that Ghostbusters will only have 1 week of premium screens, and not even all of them. Oh, that's rough. That's rough. How high can Dune Part 2 get? Right now, I think it would be phenomenal if it could just match Wonka. It could, but it doesn't need to go higher than that. If we wanted to get greedy, though, if you're a big Dune fan and you're like, let's go, maybe it could match Christopher Nolan's non-Batman films. That would mean a mid-600s to low to mid-800s. That would be that sweet spot. And I think it's probably, low. I think it's going to get to the low to mid-600s anyway. So that's great. Denis Villeneuve has got to be feeling pretty vindicated right about now, because he's never been able to post these kinds of numbers before. In fact, you might recall that for Prisoners, a movie that I loved, that was infamous for having people walk out of the theater when that movie came out. And look at him now! Never give up. But also, find yourself a franchise. Clearly, directors need a franchise to boost their careers into high gear. Even Nolan needed one. So did Steven Spielberg. And speaking of Greta Gerwig, can she turn Barbie into a franchise? I'm not sure if that's doable. But maybe, if anyone could, it's Greta Gerwig. Who would have thought the first movie would be so great and so successful? But then also these Narnia movies potentially, although those are on Netflix. So I don't know if you can do it with a streaming series. But very interesting for aspiring directors or directors who feel their careers have stalled. To the library! Go find a series of books. All right, so let's show some love to DreamWorks. They are number one after all, with a big win solidifying their recent uneven footing. Like Disney, they're excelling with sequels. And Chris Meledandri, who now heads up all of Universal Animation, he came up through Illumination, but then when Universal took over DreamWorks, their stipulation being that Jeffrey Katzenberg had to leave. Ouch! Jeffrey Katzenberg, he's a crazy dude, but don't disrespect him. Go, as I've always said, watch that documentary, Waking Sleeping Beauty. Disney Animation never would have rebounded if not for Katzenberg. But anyway, Now Meledandri is in charge of all Universal Animation, and he has confirmed that DreamWorks is developing not only Shrek 5, but finally, that donkey spin-off. Could Kung Fu Panda 4 do as well as Puss in Boots 2? It does have, again, until Garfield Memorial Day weekend, but I feel Puss in Boots 2 is not only a vastly superior film, sorry, I really do, but that film benefited from the same empty post-Christmas window where there's nothing out that Wonka, The Greatest Showman, and other movies have benefited from. Jumanji, Avatar films have even done very well there. You open right around Christmas, you play till Valentine's Day, if not March in full. I love learning the release windows, right? And also, even though there isn't any other animated fare until Garfield, that doesn't mean there aren't family movies coming down the pipeline. In fact, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is certainly a family film that could gobble up some of Kung Fu Panda 4's dumplings. The other Kung Fu Pandas might have opened lower, but look at their runs. Look how well they did. So we'll see if this time maybe the Dragon Warrior is a bit more front-loaded. At the rate that it's going, I don't know if I see it getting that far. But still, in today's entertainment landscape, it has tremendous value beyond theatrical. Animation does in particular. I mean, this counts for all movies, but it's extremely true of animation because, of course, babysitting content. So Kung Fu Panda 4 is off to a great start, which will propel it through digital, streaming, merchandise, theme parks, and more, where Universal is doing very well as emerging as a true competitor to Disney. And besides these two winners, the rest of the box office is pretty healthy too. Arthur and the King might have opened a scooch lower than Hollywood hoped, but again, we're in a different time. And for a film that clearly looks like a streaming movie to be able to come even close to 10 million opening weekend, I think is pretty nice. Very nice. And look at these audience scores. When Arthur and the King moves to digital and then streaming, it should do very well. I'm excited to watch it eventually. I mean, I'm sure some of you feel the same way. Ordinary Angels is coming to streaming and digital, not this week, but the week after. All right, so the movie skewed Caucasian and Middle American Southwest, with apparently its most successful theater in Arizona. That's unusual. Usually the top performing theaters are in New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and sometimes Florida. Mark Wahlberg might not be making huge movies these days, but he is performing very well as a brand. This is beautiful. As I recently mentioned, The Family Plan movie for Apple TV is the streaming service's biggest movie to date. Biggest debut, now biggest overall movie as well. If I had a mid-range theatrical or streaming movie, I would definitely consider paying a little bit extra for Wahlberg to star. All I gotta do is film around his new home in Las Vegas. And it's important to think about this because it's an example of a different way to build or sustain a successful career in Hollywood. You don't have to have the big blockbusters. You can just have solid, I'm trying to think of a baseball metaphor, but I don't know sports. I'm trying to learn, but baseball is the least interesting to me. But, you can just do a solids. You can get on base. That's right. He's getting on base. He's not hitting home runs, but he's eventually getting there anyway. It's very impressive. What's his next big movie? A romantic actioner opposite Halle Berry for Netflix. Oh, and the streamers, by the way, also pay extremely well. He's making a lot of money. All right, and not paying very much tax on it, or at least not income tax to Nevada. All right, and speaking of building a career, Jurassic World Dominion's DeWanda Wise is definitely going to benefit from Imaginary falling just 44% in its second weekend, which is an amazing hold for a horror film. That's almost unheard of. I mean, she's not really the face of that movie, but if I were her agent, I wouldn't care. I'd say she's in it. She's the adult lead. It's a big deal. And as a producer, I also would feel that there was something there. She has a small role in Chris Pine's upcoming film Pool Man, but her schedule's pretty wide open. But I like DeWanda Wise a lot. I thought she was great in Jurassic World Dominion, so this is great. Cabrini, though, fell 61% in its second weekend, whereas Angel Studios' Sound of Freedom, they're both from Angel Studios, that had gone up in its second weekend. Clearly, Angel Studios' Pay It Forward initiative, you might have heard of this, where moviegoers are asked to buy additional tickets so that others would be able to see the movie. That's what resulted in a lot of supposedly sold-out shows actually being empty because people had bought the tickets and yet no one had utilized them. But that didn't really catch on here. Cabrini is a religious film as well, but it's missing the conspiracy theory elements that really drove Sound of Freedom. In the specialty market, A24 has been trying very hard to launch Love Lies Bleeding. We'll see if they do a little bit better with Civil War. Civil War got a really big mix of headlines out of South by Southwest. Some very, very strong, but some not quite as strong. Its RT score isn't as strong as some of the headlines would have suggested. But anyway, A24, Love Lies Bleeding, right? With Kristen Stewart doing a lot of heavy lifting for this movie. Kudos to her. She really worked hard to promote it. And also a salacious headline over the weekend that got a ton of free press for the film. Still though, that per theater average is low, really low, too low for a movie that's supposed to have a lot of heat. Love Lies Bleeding will it's not in super wide release, so that means its per theater average should be high. It should be higher than that. I mean, it should at least be like 5K if this movie was actually, had momentum. So I think Love Lies Bleeding will probably be remembered down the line during like the Independent Film Awards, right? But mostly, I think this is it. I think it's going to be a calling card movie, which are very valuable as well. Talk about career building blocks. For Kristen Stewart, Katie O'Brien, who finally got an agent off of this film. When the film was at, I think it was like Sundance at one of the film festivals earlier in the year, Katie O'Brien's wife was on Twitter saying that she couldn't believe that her wife, Katie O'Brien, couldn't get an agent, even though she was in stuff like The Mandalorian and all these big projects. And she was like, what's it going to take? Well, finally. So hopefully Katie O'Brien will be getting even more work now. And then also filmmaker Rose Glass. So that's what a calling card movie is. It gives you, even if the movie doesn't have as much heat as you would have liked, it gives you a little bit of heat and everybody wants to know what you're doing next. And also people are familiar with the name. So for your next project, they go, from Love Lies Bleeding. And everyone goes, oh yeah, I heard of that movie. Cool, let me take a look at this one. So that's kind of what a calling card or maybe building block movie would be considered. The movie could also find an audience down the line on digital and particularly streaming, because as you might recall, it looked like it was all over for Saltburn until it hit Prime Video, and then it became like a cult hit, cult phenomenon. Speaking of streaming, audiences continue with their comfort era, reaching back to rewatch or discover network television. This is hilarious. Everyone was like, network television is dead and it deserves to be dead. But now everybody's like, oh, this is really good comfort food, man. Because network television and cable television is doing so well on streaming. And hey, these things were popular for a reason. As I said, they're very comforting. You've got Young Sheldon, Grey's Anatomy, NCIS, Monk, and Royal Pains all riding Suits' coattails, which itself is still on the overall chart. And streamers might want to consider the popularity of this type of programming as they develop their upcoming slates. Doesn't hurt to have a little variety. And this is a little bit like some of Netflix's hits, which also confounded us, Virgin River and Ginny and Georgia. I find this hilarious. Hilarious. If it brings back the sitcom, though, I will be delighted. I miss sitcoms. They serve a special, purpose. They're funny, they're short, they're really great. They're good to watch when you need something to do for a meal or before you go to sleep. I miss the sitcom. All right, and while binge watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith has fallen off the overall chart, weekly release True Detective is still holding extremely strong. Now, some haters are like, well, it's all the seasons, Grace. So maybe one person's theory was maybe people hate True Detective Season 4 so much it has inspired them to go back and watch the previous seasons to really show True Detective Season 4 what's up. What? If that were true, True Detective would always be in the top 10. It has not been in the top 10 until Season 4 hit. So it's Season 4, thank you very much. And you can see why HBO is very happy with writer-director Issa Lopez and expect, Jodie Foster. I would love to see Jodie Foster. She took a long break. She's back with this and Nyad. I hope she sticks around. And then also, this is fantastic for Callie Reese, who is definitely going to get much more and much more deserved work. Big fan of, I loved True Detective Season 4. The middle was weak, but the beginning and the end were phenomenal. Love that show. Also, shout out to Netflix, who has a reality show, not only on the overall chart, but very high up. This is one of the few shows Netflix releases weekly, like 2 or 3 episodes a week, and it seems to be effective. And then there's Oppenheimer at the very bottom of the overall chart when it hit Peacock. And that's okay, because I think most people at this point had already seen it in theaters or on digital by the time that it did get to Peacock. On the originals chart, we've got a lot of variety here. This is also very healthy. We love to see it with multiple streaming services able to play, some of them with more than one show. What an ecosystem. I love it. Griselda seems to have either caught a second wind of interest or at least held steady while other shows dropped, back at number 2. Newcomers One Day, Halo, House of Ninjas, and Masters of the Air joined Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Reacher, which are both still going strong. Love Mr. and Mrs. Smith as well. So happy. Over on the movies chart, it continues to be pretty weak over here, once again underscoring that for the most part, digital is where movies do best and streaming is for shows, which makes sense. The Marvels dropped significantly and only its second week on Disney+, while Dune is here as audiences got ready for Dune Part Two. Remember, Nielsen is a month behind. And look, Moana's back on here. Why? Because this was right after Moana 2 had been announced. And this boost is very promising that there's interest in the sequel. Over on Netflix's charts, while the reviews for Damsel might not have been great, the movie's not great. This is the biggest debut for a Netflix original film since Kevin Hart's Lift, which was also not great. And it's really good, though, for Millie Bobby Brown that she clearly has that kind of draw. That's great for her. She can't make too many more, mediocre movies, but this is very good. Adam Sandler's Spaceman saw a small bump as well for its first full week, meaning it might be more of a slow burn for Netflix as audiences discover it or decide maybe they'll give it a whirl. And considering how inexpensive the film is, probably was still worth everybody's time at the end of the day. And I gotta say, I liked that movie. I thought it was solid. It's a little bit of a downer, but also it's weird. It's a downer, but also uplifting at the same time. And that spider alien, I'll be darned if he didn't become adorable by the end of the movie. I liked it. I actually would recommend it. It's not a Friday or Saturday movie, but it's a great Sunday, watch it tonight. Or it's a great weekday movie or a matinee. It's great. Not great. It's very, very good. The Amels and Tyler Perry are still also in the mix, while there are 4 Illumination movies on this chart. With shows, The Gentleman knocked Avatar out of the number 1 spot, but that's not a great number for the Guy Ritchie series. This show also appears to be very inexpensive, but unless it really holds up well over the next few weeks, I don't think you're going to get a season 2. I would be surprised. But these Avatar numbers continue to just be okay. And I'm working my way now. I'm watching Korra. And I gotta say, Korra does make some stupid decisions. How many times is she going to let somebody manipulate her? But I still love the show. The animation is incredible. And the fight sequences in Korra are unbeatable. All right, so anyway, Netflix's decision to renew this live action, very expensive show for 2 more seasons anyway, just shows that they need to have stuff in the pipeline right now. And good enough will do. On iTunes, wow, Anyone But You is still number 1, even post-Oscars when everyone's trying to watch the winners. No wonder Glenn Powell is now asking for $5 million a picture. And Sydney Sweeney looks likely to survive Madam Web. We'll talk about her more in a moment. Speaking of Madam Web, though, the comic book movie couldn't even benefit from rubbernecking, as it's only number 4, even though it just dropped on digital. Argylle seems to have finally found a bit of an audience. It's holding off Madam Web. While, even Wonka is still in the top 10, even though it's now also available on Max at no extra cost. Timmy C is having a very good run right now. His asking price has gone up to double digits. Although is Dune Part 2, I wonder, is Dune Part 2 maybe driving Wonka a bit as well? Are people like, I need more Timmy C, here's some? Both movies are fantastic. As for this coming week, Sony is hoping to rebound after Madam Web with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It's expected to open on par with the last entry in the 40s, as long as it has a 4 in front of it. Some people think it could open with a 3 in front of it, and that would be really bad. The review embargo lifts on Wednesday. And speaking of Madam Web and Sydney Sweeney, her new horror film Immaculate opens this weekend as well. And Sweeney made a big splash at South by Southwest promoting it. She worked very hard to help the film, but the reviews are only okay. Maybe it's time for her to be a bit more discerning with the scripts she signs on for. Hey, I get it. At first, she just wanted to work, but she's done that. And now she's in the danger zone of being associated only with crap for the most part. So be careful, Sydney. On digital, SNL's Please Don't Destroy movie hits Tuesday, as well as a Zach Braff, Vanessa Hudgens rom-com. And Land of Bad. Remember, we were just talking about this movie a few weeks ago when it did it did okay in with its theatrical release. The numbers were so low that it managed to get in the top 10, but still, we were surprised. As for streaming movies, Peacock debuts documentary Stormy on Monday. I believe that was also at South by Southwest. While on Thursday, Roadhouse, which was also at South by Southwest, that hits Prime Video. I've already reviewed it. My review is up, and I would recommend that film. And on Friday, Netflix has Shirley with Regina King, and Peacock has original movie On Fire with Peter Facinelli. Remember that dude? He's still working. Then with shows, X-Men 97 is here with 2 episodes on Wednesday. 2, I'll be breaking them down. While Kristen Wiig tries for a comeback with Palm Royale on Apple TV. First 3 episodes also dropping on Wednesday. Star-studded cast, but for some reason, it seems like we've done this before. We've done this dance before. Dick Wolf also debuts his first show for Netflix, Homicide New York, which this time is a docuseries. And considering how well true crime content does on Netflix, that could do very well. And on Thursday, this is hilarious. On Thursday, Netflix has 3 Body Problem, which is supposed to be the big new show from Game of Thrones, Benioff and Weiss. It's supposed to redeem them. But so far, they were also at South by Southwest. It seems it's the same old Benioff and Weiss. Are you going to try that? It's 8 episodes. It's such a commitment, and people are saying it's bad already. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think of Dune Part 2 and Kung Fu Panda 4 coexisting, and the overall state of the movie marketplace right now? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.